Close Up from 1990 is a deeply complex yet beautifully simple film. For me, it registers on a profoundly emotional level, a postmodernist character study through the lens of poetic truth. Directed by Abbas Kiarostami, this film is a patchwork of documentary footage, interviews, and scripted scenes depicting the true story of Hossain Sabzian, a man who was put on trial for impersonating famous Iranian filmmaker Mohsen Makhmalbaf. Sabzian's apparent deception begins when a woman sitting next to him on a bus notices he has a print of Makhmalbaf's script for The Cyclist. When she strikes up a conversation, adding that she's a big fan of the film, Sabzian signs the copy and gifts it to her, passing himself off as Makhmalbaf. In good faith, she invites Sabzian into her home, where he begins planning to shoot a film starring her family, the Ahankhas, as the main characters. However, in the middle of rehearsal, Sabzian is arrested by the police under charges of fraud with the intent to steal. While he's being held custody, Kiarostami visits him in jail, asking for permission to make a film about the incident. The rest of the film is set during his subsequent trial and the decision that's eventually made. And by that I mean footage of his actual trial was used in the production, with reenactments featuring all of the real-life people involved filling in the gaps. Still following me, right? In some respects, I actually find that Close Up is harder to explain than it is to just watch. But it's my job to overcomplicate things, so I'll leave the watching to you because it's free on YouTube and you can leave the complicating things to me. See, the amount of layers that this film has makes onions jealous, and ogres. So let's peel a few of them back and dissect what I consider one of the greatest films ever made. Firstly, the title, Close Up. At the beginning of Sabzian's trial, Kiarostami off-screen explains how they will go about shooting the proceedings.
ما دو تا دوربین داریم اینجا. این دوربین هست. لنز کلوزآپ. میدونی چه کلوزآپ چیه؟
And before that, their meeting in the jail begins in a wide shot, then slowly zooms in. In essence, the use of this close-up states that we as the audience are not here to witness the facts of the case itself. Instead, our attention is drawn towards Sabzian, his side of the story, and his true intentions. The film scholar Hamid Naficy wrote about this exact scene in his book, A Social History of Iranian Cinema, Volume 4.
Kiarostami explains to Sabzian that there are two cameras in the court. The one that is filming in long shots, he tells Sabzian, belongs to the court. That is, it is for outsiders, designed to film external reality. On the other hand, he tells Sabzian that the camera that films in close-up is for us, and not for the court. That is, it is for the insiders, intended to record the internal reality. The truth.
This is also present in the multiple times that we see a close-up shot of the reporter Hossain Sabzian's camera during the trial. Sabzian was present at Sabzian's arrest and sensationalized his story in the papers. If French filmmaker Jean-Luc Godard said that
La photographie, c'est la vérité. Et le cinéma, c'est 24 fois la vérité par seconde.
Then Kiarostami and Sabzian's camera captured two wildly different truths. One, an expose of Sabzian, the liar and fraud. The other, a portrait of Sabzian, the aspiring artist. This is further enhanced by Kiarostami employing the aesthetics of something we in the film world pretentiously call cinéma vérité. Now, cinéma vérité, or cinema of truth, is a cinematic movement pioneered in part by the aforementioned Godard that aims to convey the candid nature of reality.
Vécu par des hommes et des femmes qui ont donné des moments de leur existence à une expérience nouvelle de cinéma vérité.
Many scenes in close-up embody this desire to resemble documentary realism. Most notably, the moment where the taxi Sabzian and the police are taking to arrest Sabzian is stopped by a turkey seller. Another instance that comes to mind is the peculiar choice made when we see the actual arrest take place for the first time. Rather than following the officers indoors, the camera stays outside, strangely fixated on the driver. The whole thing is almost comedic in how mundane it is, showing him picking flowers and kicking a can down the street in a truly bizarre sequence. This seemingly insignificant moment has always stuck with me. To quote Naficy again,
The air of make-do and improvisation adds to Kiarostami's visual asides and what appears to be his unscripted and spontaneous filming style. His highly planned style is calculated to look unplanned, and it is in fact open to chance and discovery. The accumulation of these whimsical asides and seemingly improvised moments of discovery help constitute not only the philosophical core of the film, but also its critique of Iranian society.
This socially based interpretation that Naficy alludes to is also in the incidents surrounding the can-kicking scene. The fact that the police don't own a squad car, instead relying on taxis, the ineptitude of Farazman's journalism, needing to beg people in the neighborhood for a tape recorder, and the societal desperation that caused Sabzian to lie about his status in the first place all subtly speak to the state of post-revolution Iran, as well as a criticism of the establishment that's prosecuting him in the first place. It also emphasizes the power imbalance and class struggle that actually unites Sabzian and the Akhankha family, the former being an impoverished man with kids, and the latter being from a Turkish-speaking minority group. Within the context of their society, they are powerless, moving to the whims of forces outside of their control, like a can being kicked down a street. Through another lens, however, bear with me here, the scene also exists in blatant defiance of a perceived essential law in Hollywood filmmaking, the notion that the camera and ultimately the scene must follow where the action is. In sort of a snarky way, this is Kiarostami showing off his control over the viewer's attention. He commands the titular close-up, not the courts, and certainly not the audience. Wow, I just spent 5 minutes talking about the socio-political, philosophical, and cinematic implications of a man kicking a can down the street. You jealous of these layers yet, Shrek? Now, Close-Up poses a multitude of philosophical inquiries, but they all stem from one essential question. Why did Hossain Sabzian lie about being Mohsen Makhmalbaf? If you ask the Akhankha family and the court, it was fraud, plain and simple. There is clearly no other reason someone would pretend to be a filmmaker and accept money from an unsuspecting family for a movie that he never actually intended to make. And on the surface, this case seems open and shut. But Sabzian has another story to tell for himself. It was never about the money. All he wanted was to be someone like Makhmalbaf, respected for telling amazing stories through the language of film. Kiarostami argues for moral ambiguity through Sabzian in the face of a court set on black and white, dualistic ideas of right and wrong. In turn, he makes Sabzian into this complex figure, one that both the audience and the court can understand and sympathize with. Thus, a parallel is drawn between Sabzian's deception and the act of lying that is inherent in filmmaking.
Indeed, Close-Up is entirely about the lie at the heart of cinema, whereby actors pretend to be others, producing a sustained and complex treatise on the morality of the Iranian dichotomy between being and acting.
Sabzian dreamt of being regarded by the world as a great artist. Kiarostami wanted to show him that his existence is just that. His passion is what makes him great. And by being the main character, so to speak, of this movie, he himself has played a role in the creation of great art. The trial concludes with the Akhankha family pardoning Sabzian, who then exits the courtroom to meet none other than the real Mohsen Makhmalbaf outside. However, in the middle of filming their encounter, there appears to be an issue with the connectivity of their mics, something that is pointed out by Kiarostami and his crew off-screen. Now, including this mistake is a bold move, as it almost speaks to a sense of ill-equipped desperation, this moment being their only shot at capturing the encounter. But Hamid Naficy states that this was actually done on purpose, and for a very specific reason.
It is important to point out that the bad connection is in fact only a ruse, deliberately manufactured in post-production. In doing this, Kiarostami has acted like Sabzian, pretending to have a bad connection. Unlike Sabzian, he does not confess to his fraud on film. Perhaps with this ruse, he is telling us that the content of their conversation is not important. What is important is that the lover and beloved, fan and star, disciple and master are united, a classic trope in Persian mystic poetry and philosophy.
Perhaps what was said between Sabzian and Makhmalbaf was only meant for their ears, an exchange so profound that film could not convey it. Makhmalbaf has Sabzian buy flowers as they make their way to the Akhankha family, transitioning into a scripted scene showing the deceiver asking forgiveness from the deceived. I also just love the fact that at some point Makhmalbaf had to approach the Akhankhas to shoot this scene, and he probably had to stress like, yeah, no, it's like actually me this time, I swear. Sabzian is reintroduced to the family, and the air is finally cleared, gently landing the film on its one and only freeze frame. Now, this final shot, Oh boy, if you thought my interpretation of the friggin' can was long-winded, wait until you hear this. The composition alone is worthy of praise. The way Sabzian is set off to the right of the screen with his face framed by the flowers, in a film that's mostly shot in shallow focus, meaning that all objects on the screen are visibly distinguished, this seems to be one of the only deep focus shots, blurring out the background to center attention on the subject with clarity. It's as if to say, this time, focus on Sabzian, quite literally ending close-up on a close-up. Part of the beauty of this shot is how it follows the last lines in the film, spoken by Makhmalbaf and Mr. Ahankha.
آقای سبزیان اون آقای سبزیان نیست. انشالله که شما ایشونو با یه چشم دیگه نگاه کنید.
انشالله خوب بشن و باعث افتخار ما بشن بعد از.
Its sudden juxtaposition, breaking the 180-degree rule from the previous shot, almost reads like Mr. Ahankha's POV, portraying Sabzian's restoration in his eyes. It's a far cry from the interrogative gaze the courtroom camera practically studied him through. This view grants Sabzian more humanity. I'd also like to make a point about screen direction and how the human eye perceives a scene as moving a certain way, especially when it sees a face in profile or any horizontal movement. This is also informed by culture, as people perceive said motion differently depending on their national upbringing. Viewers from regions where language is historically read left to right interpret left to right motion as moving forward or away from any given origin, and movement in the other direction is interpreted as returning to any given origin. This is why the opening scene of The Graduate, for example, visually communicates Dustin Hoffman's journey home without any verbal exposition. However, the Perso-Arabic script, which is used in many languages in Iran, is read from right to left, so this shot would be understood by an Iranian audience as moving or looking forward, alluding to the idea that Sabzian has been redeemed and is now facing his future. With the motif of the flowers, I feel as though Kiarostami is referencing Charlie Chaplin's 1931 film, City Lights. I actually remember discussing this after class with a film professor, seeing as these two films share similar themes of fraud, redemption, and the plight of lower-class people. Chaplin was always one of the best in his era at social commentary told through visual humor. City Lights features his archetypical tramp character as a poor man pretending to be rich to impress a flower-selling blind woman. In the end, despite all of his lying, this woman still accepts him, the final shot resembling that of Sabzian, with a flower also subtly obscuring his face. While they're both depictions of men being caught in their deception, the two are like mirror images, as if regarding one another in all of their shared, albeit lighthearted, embarrassment. This reference immortalizes Sabzian in film history, visual proof that he deserves to be remembered in the same breath as legends like Charlie Chaplin and his hero Mohsen Makhmalbaf. I have fallen deeply in love with how this film sees the world, which only makes the reality that came after it more upsetting. Sabzian never became a famous filmmaker, with the popularity of Close-Up only cementing his reputation in the industry as a liar. A full Where Are They Now documentary called Close-Up Long Shot was made in 1996, featuring his life after the film.
و با دیدن هر فیلم خوب باز احساس زایش میکنم، احساس میکنم که این فیلم رو من به وجود آوردم، ساخته منه، احساس میکنم قصه منه.
It may be depressing to see what he would end up becoming, but for a short while, Sabzian was what he always wanted to be, a great artist. And because of this film, even long after his death, people will continue to be touched by the most authentic story he could ever tell, the one about himself.
الان دارم دردمو میگم. بازیگر نه، بازی نمیکنم. دارم حرفمو میزنم.
Thank you all for watching. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe and give the video a like if you haven't already. Leave a comment too, because I always treat my comment section like a discussion board, and I love nothing more than discussing movies with you guys. I felt like covering this film, not just because I revere it so deeply, but because I also think it's important to consume media from other cultures, especially if that culture is one that the government of your homeland would probably benefit from you being ignorant towards. Iranian cinema, along with every other national cinema, is just as intelligent and worthy of respect as Hollywood filmmaking. People in lands far away may be strangers to you, but film erodes the borders of nations and allows us to speak to each other from the heart. Like Sabzian, we all struggle in our day-to-day lives, yearning for something greater just out of our reach. And I want this video to serve as a reminder of that. Anyways, take care you all. I'll catch you guys next time.
Indeed.
Indeed, Close-Up is entirely about the lie at the heart of cinema, whereby actors pretend to be others, producing a sustained and complex treatise on the morality of the Iranian dichotomy between being and acting.
Sorry.